welcome to Applicata Biblia. My name is Mark. Thank you so much for stopping by. I did a whole intro and I realized my microphone wasn't on, so I had to get it all fixed up. Anyway, we are studying in the book of John, chapter 7 is where we are. So if you are a newer Christian, which is really what I'm trying to make this geared for, I hope you are starting to notice the repeating themes and words and phrases so far. We see Jesus doing all of these miracles, right? He's become very popular, and now we're starting to see the tough part of what Jesus is starting to teach and preach, and it's actually pushing some people away. But he's performing a lot of miracles and a lot of signs. That's a repetitive thing, which he does to reveal that he is from God. He makes that statement that he's from God. He's the Son of God. He can't come out and say that directly, and we've talked about that. You can't come out and say, I'm the Son of God, because if you equate yourself with God, it's something that is punishable by death. So he's not going to do it yet. That's another thing we see, that it wasn't yet time. So there's implications with that as well, and we'll get into that in this chapter. So this is something, if you're new to studying, you want to see these repetitive things. What is Jesus trying to say? One of the other things is he keeps talking about is everlasting life. John keeps referring to everlasting life. And so we see Jesus is addressing who we really are. We're spiritual beings. We are made in the image of God, not just that we would look like him and hopefully act like him, but that we have this access to everlasting life and all the real meaning behind that. Okay, so I might have some notes over here, so I'm going to be reading through, I'm not going to read, but we're going to cover verses 1 through 5. I'm not going to read, after you get a little bit of insight into it, it might make your reading better. That's what I'm hoping happens here in your own study. So the key words and phrases that I think are important are lusting to kill him. Jesus doesn't want to go to the Feast of Tabernacles because they know that the elites, or the people in the temple, the officials, they want to kill Jesus. And the other important thing here is his brothers did not believe into him or unto him, and we'll talk about what that means here in a second. Okay, 1 through 5. We see a short insight into the uphill battle Jesus has in convincing even his own brothers who he is. They tell him to leave the area and move to Judea, Jerusalem, so that his disciples will see more of his works. He's not talking about his 12 disciples. They're talking about all the people who want to believe in you, Jesus. Why don't you go there and practice what you're talking about? And they are essentially criticizing him with, you want to be a public figure, you need to go to a more prominent city. You're in Galilee, come on. It feels more like a slight against their brother. They do not believe he is who he asserts he is. If he did move to Judea, his assertions would eventually fall apart under higher scrutiny. That's more like what they're thinking about. So it's important to note that the terms brethren and or brother are used extensively in the New Testament. And the Greek word is adelphos for both words. And it might mean brethren as in close kinsmen, like cousins and uncles and nephews, or race, like Jews and other Jews, being brethren. This passage has been interpreted by some to simply mean other Jews, by those who wish to claim that Mary had no other children, to create this doctrine of Jesus and her piety and all that. That's a very big issue, because there's a secular historian named Josephus who names James as a brother or a sibling to Jesus. not the other two, not a kinsman, but a direct brother, a sibling. So this whole Mary remaining a virgin narrative simply falls apart with that evidence. Now the works mentioned here do not necessarily just address miracles or signs only. They are implying that all that Jesus is saying and doing needs to be tested so he can fail. I really believe this is what they're thinking. Why don't you just go to Jerusalem and do what you're doing here, right? You need to be over there. If you want to be famous, that's where you need to go. So, they're kind of giving him a hard time about this. Okay. So, through verse 10. The key words and phrases here that I see are, my time is not here yet. Again, Jesus is talking about that. Remember, Jesus talked about that to his mother when she wanted him to do something about no wine and all that. And the term secret, okay, I think it's important to see. In the last chapter, we saw people walking away from Jesus. They were really upset with him. And now, Jesus also knows that the powers that be in Jerusalem want to kill him. They lust to kill him. So this is driving Jesus to act a certain way. He can't just come out and say who he is because they'll kill him right away, and it's not time yet. Now, Jesus does not admonish his brothers. He simply states that he is not yet ready to go to the feast because his time has not come yet. Again, the idea that this is a plan, and the plan for him to just thrust himself in front of these people and accuse them and tell him who he is, it's not time. So John tells us that what Jesus already knows in verse 1, that the officials want to permanently silence him. So his brothers go to the festival, and Jesus does too, but without them. He travels in secret. And, we see Jesus talking about the timing of his ministry. And it's important to see that. He says, my time is not here. There may be multiple interpretations for this, but they all point to the same thing. Jesus is living out a timeline according to a plan. Everything he does needs to fit within the plan and its eventual outcome. And really, when you consider how much they wanted to kill Jesus, it was probably a good idea that he didn't travel with his brothers. They probably thought, well, that's a good idea. Yeah, we don't want you to come with us anyway. Okay, verses 11 through 18. Now, the key words and phrases here that I saw right, it's kind of off the top of my head, are sought him, and some said, versus others said. So, Jesus does go to Jerusalem, and before he ever even shows up, the officials who don't like Jesus and they want to kill him, they're asking about him. They're looking for him. Well, why are they looking for him? Well, Jesus has already showed up and flipped tables and stuff and, kicked people out. He's a disruptor. We've already talked about that. And then this idea that some people, when they get there, some people are saying certain things about Jesus, and other people are saying something just the opposite. Some people believe, some people don't. Okay? Now, Jesus makes it to the Feast of Tabernacles. The leaders are looking for him. Now, remember, they want him dead. John notes that there is some discussion and division among the people concerning Jesus. Some think he is good. Others believe he's basically a liar and a deceiver. They don't call him that, but they're implying it. What is also noted is that the people don't even want to speak publicly about it. So they're talking about it, but there's kind of, between themselves. They're not going to be talking about him in public. And it's public knowledge that Jesus is on the bad side of the leaders, And most people don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to talk about Jesus like, I just want to go do what I need to do. I need to make my sacrifices and, pay a tax or whatever it is I need to do, and I'm done. So once Jesus does begin to teach, he shows up and he does begin to teach, the leaders are amazed. They question how he could know these written things if he has not been taught. They're like, who is this guy? He hasn't been taught. He hasn't been in anybody's, they didn't send him to school. So Jesus alludes. So he doesn't go directly, he doesn't even tell them anything about that yet. He alludes to God having sent him to dispense this word. He says, anyone seeking to do God's will would know whether I am from him or not. He speaks for God and not himself, is what he says. Jesus is directly addressing the accusation against him. In this chapter, it started with his brothers, then the people, and now the people in the temple elites, and its leaders. So he's addressing all of these people. They're like, Jesus, he's a nobody. And then, well, I don't know, he's done all these signs. So what can you say about that, right? And Jesus is saying, I came from God. That's what he's trying to tell them. And if you knew that, you would understand everything. He really just kind of conks people over the head with his words being so strong without actually accusing them of anything. Okay, verses 19 through 24. Now the key words and phrases I see here is Moses, law, and sight versus righteousness. And again, the idea of the Mosaical law is ingrained in the culture. We have to remember this when we study this. It's ingrained in the culture. It's Jesus himself. He's in subjection to the Mosaical law. And so he goes there to make his strongest arguments. He pivots his discussion to an accusation. He brings up Moses' law and how it is that they do not really follow it. He notes that in some cases, in order to follow it, they break it. Then he applies that to his Sabbath healing. And they oppose that. He's like, you guys break it all the time, and then I heal one guy, and you get all crazy. He accuses them of being more concerned of external traditions rather than those things that are righteous and good. Okay? So he's making this argument. This is what Jesus does. He sees what they're thinking and doing, and he just starts to dismantle it with the very things that they believe in. Okay. Verses 25 through 31. Now, and here I see the key words kill, right? They want to kill Jesus, and I know him. This is, Jesus will make these comparative terms and contrastive terms. He's basically saying, I know God, and you don't. Now, some of the citizens talk among themselves. They know Jesus is the one the leaders want dead, but the leaders are allowing him to speak and teach. So they reason, well, maybe the leaders actually think Jesus is the Messiah. Some people reason that because they know his origins, he cannot be Christ, right? And Jesus tells them, yes, you know where I came from. Then essentially he says, I came from God. He's the one who sent me. He tells them that they do not know God, but he does know him. The word used for know is eido, which means, it's E-I-D-O in pronunciation. It means to see. So Jesus knows Jehovah because he has seen him and knows Jehovah in a very personal way. It's not just knowledge. He's saying, you don't see God, but I have. They, on the other hand, do not recognize him even though he's right in front of him. And he's saying, you don't even recognize God. He's right in front of you. This enrages the leaders who want to jail Jesus right now. But it was not his time. And still, Many did believe because of all the signs he had performed. They just couldn't get away from that fact. That's why Jesus is doing it. It really helped a lot of people in their faith for Jesus to be doing these miracles and these signs. Okay. Verses 32 through 36. In this section, the key words that I see are Pharisees, chief priests, and officers. And I go to him who sent me, is what Jesus says. So here we see the elites of the temple, these Pharisees and chief priests, and these officers are basically, they're like the temple security force, right? And Jesus is going to confound them. He's going to talk about going somewhere where they can't go, and he just confuses them, right? They tell them, "You go get Jesus and bring him here. We want to arrest him right now." So they send him off, and so the leaders send these guys to arrest Jesus. He thwarts them by speaking cryptically over their understanding. It's just over their heads. That's what I mean by that. He essentially says he will be leaving eventually back to the one who sent him, God, right? And he doesn't say God, but he says back to the one who sent him. And they cannot come. And they're going, "What do you mean? What does he mean by that? What do you mean he can't come? Is he gonna kill himself? What's going on?" So Jesus uses their unbelief against them to stop them for now. They are simply dumbfounded by his words. That's all. They're just totally confused by this. Jesus was really good at doing this. And it's not like he's, saying something so overtly intelligent that it's like, rocket science. He's basically using there's the simplicity of what they're thinking about him and about God to confuse them. Okay. Verses 37 through 49. Now, the key phrases and words here in my mind are Holy Spirit, prophet, Galilee, and Bethlehem. Now, of course, the idea of the Holy Spirit isn't even on these people's minds. And it's important to see that also what they expected. And this is something that the elite are going to hang on to. Their idea of the prophets that talked about where the Messiah would come from was Bethlehem. And they're like, Jesus didn't come from Bethlehem, even though he was born there. We'll get into that. And Galilee, that's another contrast. You've got Galilee, which is kind of a reject of an area of people. And then you've got Bethlehem, which is where this Messiah is supposed to come from, right? So it's the last day of the feast, and Jesus is teaching, and the officers are still charged to arrest Jesus. Jesus says, "Anyone who thirsts, come to me and drink." Now, he's prophesying concerning the Holy Spirit. But nobody knows that yet. Some people believe in him, others doubt, since he is from the reject area of Galilee. Some of the people want Jesus seized, but no one lays a hand on him. The officers return to the chief priests and Pharisees, and the chief priests and Pharisees ask, "Why didn't you bring him?" And the officers reply, "Nobody's ever spoken like him before." So they see Jesus speaking with such authority and talking about things they simply can't understand, that they just don't even touch him. And this is God working, okay? I really do believe this. This is God and the Holy Spirit working to keep Jesus safe. I really do believe that. I think if it was anybody else, they just would have grabbed him. But Jesus is able to stop them with his words. That's the power of the word, right? So the leaders are even more enraged. "You don't believe too, do you?" they ask. No, and then they say, no leader believes in this guy. Anyone who does not know the law, and they're cursed. They're saying, if anybody believes in this guy, they're cursed. They don't know anything. They don't know the law. They don't know anything. Now, the leaders never address the signs that Jesus has been performing. They have tried to say that his power is from Satan before, but Jesus proved that theory wrong. The truth is that Jesus just does not fit their expectancy of the Messiah. That can be an issue even for today's Christian. Think about that. Sometimes God does not show up like we expect him to. We should learn as Christians. We need to learn a few things from that. Okay. Verses 50 through 52. And in this short section, the main word for me was Nicodemus. Wow. Yeah, Nicodemus shows up again, right? Remember Nicodemus from a few chapters ago, early on? He goes in the middle of the night or whenever it was at nighttime. So his other brothers don't see him because he's of the elite class, right? He's a leader in the temple. And he goes by night to talk to Jesus, and Jesus is telling him about being born again and all these things, and he's like, how can this be? And Jesus goes, you're a teacher? You don't know this stuff? Come on. Yeah, that Nicodemus. Well, the elites are talking, and they're basically talking about how they want to kill Jesus. That's what, they just want him gone. They want him out of the way. And Nicodemus says, he cites a law that requires a hearing before passing judgment. He says, doesn't our law require a hearing? And the leaders are headed off the rails now with anger. They accuse Nicodemus of being a believer as well. Then they tell him to check the scriptures. Are you a believer too? You need to look up the scriptures because the Messiah will not come from Galilee, right? Now, it's apparent that Nicodemus is believing in Jesus, in my mind. As he stated in chapter 3, only someone from God could perform all these signs that Jesus was doing. Jesus keeps hammering on their abuse of the law. Even Nicodemus sees it and uses that abuse to defend Jesus. He stuck his neck out for him. The bigger question is, in my mind, is do the leaders know better? I think they do. It should have been common knowledge that Joseph was of Judah and Bethlehem and just lived in Galilee for whatever reasons. Something caused him to move there. So I think it's willful ignorance. As we know, cognitive dissonance is nothing new, right? Okay, so that covers chapter 7. Coming up in chapter 8, Jesus continues to use Moses' law against his detractors. He implicates himself again equal with God. He keeps doing that and calls the leaders sons of the devil. It just keeps ramping up. Okay? All right. See you in the next one.